Hi everyone, it's Mr. Kiefler. I teach at Victoria School of the Arts, and today we're talking about paraphrasing. So last time, or in a different video that you may have seen, we talked about phrasing, and today we're talking about paraphrasing. And part of what's important is, if you haven't seen that video on phrasing, you might want to watch it. It'll be a good refresher because it sets up some of the stuff we talk about in paraphrasing. So before we get into it, of course, all of our curricular ties are all the same. Again, we're communicating using vocabulary in terms unique to the theater. We're utilizing rehearsal experiences to improve stage performances and explaining and applying the use of an actor's book. So again, those are all really important to know that what you're working on, because those are the things that you should be focusing on. When you talk about the work that you're doing, use the language we're using, and make sure you do this work when you're working in your rehearsal work, either at home or in the hall. And finally, real-world connections include understanding and appreciating poetic language, analyzing text, and clarity in the written word. The more you do this stuff, the better you're going to get at understanding heightened language and analyzing text in general, especially for the purpose of memorizing, but I prefer saying learning text. That's going to be a huge part. And then finally, writing text as well. How would you say it? Is the main question of paraphrasing. And when you're writing it down, you want to know exactly what you think before you're writing down what a character thinks. And in this case, before we can really understand how a character would say it, we need to understand how you would say it. So we have been analyzing Eminem's hit song "Lose Yourself" and from 8 Mile. And this chunk here says, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted or in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? And then yo feels like a bit of an add-on. So the thing that I want us to focus on is, in paraphrasing, what you're really doing is you're taking the entire idea and you're simplifying it into your own words. So how would you say this whole idea? Now, some of the things you want to avoid is using any of the same words. So I'm not going to say look. I'm not going to say if you had. I'm not going to say one shot. I might say, this is how I might say it. When the time comes, are you going to rise to the challenge? That's how I might say it. Now, there's some things I want to notice about this. I don't think I've used pretty much any of these words. I mean, things like the, to, that's all fine. Don't worry about reusing those words. But you don't want the main ideas you don't want to reuse. And you also notice that this is shorter than than Eminem wrote it. You don't want your paraphrase to be super long. It has to be something that you can remember really quickly. It should be very, very simple. Keep it super simple. So, yeah, don't use his language. You're not translating it. You're saying it in your own words. I'm not as hip hop as Eminem, so I'm not going to try to say it hip hop. Just like when we go to Shakespeare, right here, I'm not as poetical as Shakespeare. So, let's go to a really poetical part of this, a part that makes Shakespeare look really good, makes Romeo look really good. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who's already sick and pale with grief, that thou her maid art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. So this is where the phrasing comes in really handy, because it's going to help you understand the main idea of this sentence. So I'm just going to do, kind of quickly, I'm going to do a translation for you. And we're going to show you how a translation is different than a paraphrase. So a translation is you taking every single word and turning it. So instead of saying arise, you say wake up. Instead of saying fair sun, saying nice star. Instead of saying and kill the envious moon, you're going to say murder the jealous Luna, which is a fancy way to say moon, I guess. So part of the problem with that is that this is a translation. You're not actually making it simpler, and frankly, this is not how I would say this. One of the other things is it's also matching the rhythm of what Shakespeare wrote. Wake up, nice star, murder, the jealous Luna. Okay, it's a little bit off, but it's pretty close. So I don't want this whole idea to take up just as much time to say, because I'm not going to be able to memorize it. It's going to be hard to connect that to my own personal thoughts. And so frankly, what I would offer is, this is actually just one sentence, my friends. It's 6 lines of text, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines of text. But if you look at it, there's only 1 period. So really, what is Romeo trying to say over this whole thing? So he's talking a lot about the moon. He's talking about how the moon is jealous and how the moon isn't as beautiful as Juliet is, and how Juliet shouldn't be a servant to the moon because the moon is jealous of her. She should just leave her uniform behind and leave it and become herself. Now, that's still quite a lot to say, what I've just said, in terms of paraphrasing the sentence. So really, if I was going to say this sentence in my own words, I would say, Juliet, you're more beautiful than anything in the natural world. Just be yourself. There you go. A really nice, simple paraphrase for a single sentence. And part of why that's important is, if you look at this whole piece, you got about 4 sentences up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. But then you have a single sentence, a single sentence, a single sentence, a single sentence, a single sentence. And then coming down here, this is all one sentence. So what happens is, you're actually able to reduce your text down by paraphrasing it. So really simply, friends, I would say essentially a single paraphrase per sentence. And there's some simple rules that I want you to follow. I'm going to show you those in the next slide. So your task is, using the Shakespearean sonnets that you have, is to paraphrase the text. Rewrite the text the way that you would say it, but not as a translation. If you want to see some translated text, you can go to SparkNotes. No Fear Shakespeare has some pretty reliable translations, but that's why those texts, when your teachers say don't use them, it's not that it's bad. Like, that's good information to have. Any information you have about any text, as long as you are allowed to interpret it, is great. But a translation, just like from English to French, is interpreting to a different language. So going from heightened text to modern speech. But a paraphrase is saying it in your own words. And what I'm really interested in is for you to be able to grasp Shakespeare and say it in your own words. Because then what happens is you turn it around. And when you're performing it, let's say, instead of saying, to be or not to be, that is the question. What you're really saying is, I don't know what to do. And then a coach or a director can say it just like you said it. And you go, to be or not to be, that is the question. And then for the audience, it comes across, paraphrasing allows it to come across a lot more understandable and a lot more relatable. So some reminders. Translation is interpreting to a different language, but paraphrasing it is saying it in your own words. Don't use the same words. Don't try to keep a rhythm of any of the speech, and don't make the sentence longer than it was before. Do add memes, slangs, colloquialisms. Add things that you would say, or add metaphors that you would use, but keep it super simple. Sonnets are only 14 lines. So if you're using a sonnet, you should have no more than 14 lines of paraphrase. But I'm willing to bet that some of those sonnets have less sentences, and so it should be really quick to do this task. And I hope it's one that you enjoy.